Hi, everyone, and thank you for listening. This podcast is a bit of an extension of my interest that I have myself, but also brings in topics that we can't necessarily bring through our company to you. So this is just an extension of my passion of bringing more knowledge into conscious leadership in particular. And Dr. Ron Stotts is an expert in that, has been doing this for many decades, have worked with many, many different leaders in that field, really high end. And I really enjoy also reading his story on his website, actually, how he got to that. So I hope we have time to talk about that as well. Ron, you are a multiple best-selling author as well, and have put your story in books that I hope we will touch on afterwards as well. But one thing that I can see is sort of like an overarching theme is the conscious leadership that that you teach people through different tools, I believe. How did you get into this line of work?
I'm just walking down the street one day and it came to me. No, I've been doing, I've been a psychotherapist, counselor, all those different things when I was younger. And as I got further along on my journey, I just really recognized that my biggest agenda is to create a more conscious and caring world. I have kids and grandkids and even great grandkids now. So I'm really looked at what would have the biggest influence and the biggest impact that I could have in that area. And it turns out that leaders really do have a huge impact, not only on an organizational level, but on a societal level. Not only just an impact, but a lasting impact. And so I happen to have the ability to take people into higher levels of consciousness, really accessing their greater abilities and insights and consciousness. And so that shift, I had worked with some quite significant leaders in the past, but I'd never really thought of them as my, core audience and that type of thing. But as I shifted to that, I really found myself connecting with some incredibly interesting and interested people who, had reached certain levels within their success that as thrilling as those levels were, they were looking for more. And the theme that I started seeing again and again and again is that they're looking outside of themselves for what really they could only find within. They were kind of experts at playing whack-a-mole and solving all sorts of issues and getting highly paid for that. And I started recognizing that most of those issues that they're solving are really just a result of their own inner issues that they haven't even looked at. So I think it was that recognition that, the biggest problem in leadership today that I see is that they're looking outside of themselves for what can only be found within. And that inner journey happens to be an area of expertise of mine that I love taking people on that journey. And it's just so rewarding and really, it's a privilege to be part of that journey with somebody. And so I've been doing it for quite a while now and enjoying it.
It is really exciting, and it really touches a chord in me when you talk about this. Often when people ask me, how did you get quite successful in what you do with the companies that I run together with my business partner? And one piece of advice, and I don't even know where it came from early on, was really that I will always be the glass ceiling of the business. If I don't evolve, the business can't. And I trusted that that's true, but I didn't understand what that really meant. And over the few recent years, I got a better understanding. And I just want to test with you that whether my theory there is correct. Let's say I do get really triggered if a customer doesn't pay, and I pay, and I make this a little bit of a crisis and drama and so on, and it distracts my people because they see I'm looking at it, so they're looking at it and they're focusing on that. Versus, we need a good collection process for outstanding bills. And I get on with my day, and I don't bring drama into the team. Is that sort of like these types of things where when consciousness rise, and I understand this is my problem, I have to solve it. Otherwise, I will affect everyone else with my issues. Is that sort of like an example that you would say has to do with rising consciousness?
Leaders lead with their ego, and that's your ego coming out. Somebody's not fulfilling their side of the bargain, and you have expectations and desires that aren't being fulfilled. So that brings up anger, and that distracts everybody and doesn't let everybody feel safe and coachable. So yeah, that's not the psychoanalyzer here in the middle of this, but that's that's really where if you were on a discovery call with me, that's where I would go. I would go, okay, and so what's that about? When did you first notice that? When in your past did you start using that as a tool to get what you wanted? And how well is that working or not working? Because that's the antithesis of who you want to be as a leader, at least a successful conscious leader. And, the truth is conscious leadership really, all the research clearly shows that it increases productivity and profits by a significant amount. I mean, the research shows 40%, but I've seen my clients even well beyond that in terms of their increases. I was working with a fellow the other day. We worked more intensely about 5 years ago, but we still touch base, and I help him out with certain things as we go. And he's in the middle of a huge launch right now in international business, and he's got 5 9-figure businesses. I shouldn't even say that because it's more than double the value of those since we started working together. And it just is continuing to grow and learn, and it's always, every time he comes to me with that next level that he's going to take his life to, it's just about him getting quieter, him trusting himself more, him trusting others more, him creating stronger connections so that he can trust the people that need to do the work. He can't do it all. And he started, when he came to me initially, he did it all. He was micromanaging 5 organizations and everything else. But, now he's can't. He's going into his mid-60s. He's still a bull of a guy. But, when you start playing on international levels with 5, huge international organizations, it's like, you've got to be overseeing, not, managing or trying to take care of anything yourself, really. And so, that those triggers, those challenges that we haven't healed are what keep us from being on the level of consciousness and presence enough to move into those levels. So, yeah.
So if I take it one step back, the problems that people see you is that are trust issues, like I said, like a really common one, or just overwhelm, burnout, or how would people know that they have a need to really evolve so that their company can evolve?
Well, I think people come to me when they want more. They want more of themselves. They want more money. They want more, something, more. They want to take their life up and leadership up to another level, however we want to word that. And so,
Yes.
The truth is, that's the indicator. There's a frustration. They're doubling down and not getting the results they want. They've reached a certain level of success, and it doesn't seem to be, continuing to grow at the same rate that they're looking for. Whatever it is, and oftentimes at home there's challenges. And so we just begin to explore those challenges, and in resolving those, all those other outer things get handled. Quite literally. The fellow I was talking about earlier in relationship to something you said earlier, the quote I use from him is, I never realized how much my personal and professional path, growth go hand in hand. And they do. They are, if you want to grow, you have to access more of yourself. And to access more of yourself, you need to heal what's hasn't been healed so you can access that more. And that more is exactly what you need to continue to evolve and take your leadership in life up to the next level. Pretty straightforward.
What are the common issues that you see? Like, are there like sort of the 5 top things that you say, look, if you address that in your life, if you work with me, this will be, I'm pretty sure this will be the ones that any leader struggles at a particular stage of their career. Would you be able to identify them, or do they vary vastly depending on the circumstances?
As I come out in personality types, but one is that people who were smart as a kid. That's how they got attention. That's how they got love, and they got into the right school. They got into the right job, and they continued on. But they never quite got that they only were using a part of their brain, the left logical part of their brain. And so all of a sudden they reach a point where that's not enough. And so they need to, access the right brain and reintegrate for literally whole brain integrated thinking. And that comes from really becoming more self-aware and emotionally intelligent. And so they're used to that trying efforting. I mean, working with a guy right now, he's a CEO. He wants to become a CEO, but he keeps running into challenges, and the challenge is that he can't get out of his head. He can't quiet his mind. I mean, my more advanced people that I work with not only don't try and figure things out, they quiet their mind and just focus on what they need and let it come in. I mean, it's the antithesis of that efforting and trying that they were rewarded with all their life. Other people are, top down, authoritative control people, and that works. You can make a lot of money, but then it falls apart. You start losing people, your relationships at home fall apart. And so you realize, oh, I need to do this different in this day and age where everybody's, not really tolerating that sort of thing anymore. That was the way to go in the 50s, but it's certainly not something that works any longer. And so, they have to go, okay, well, let me take a step back and learn more about myself so that I can become that person that's more connected and create a more cooperative and collaborative organization so that we can be more productive and make more money.
Is that something that is also connected to the time we're living in? You mentioned the 50s. So in the 50s, would a conscious leadership style still have worked? Or was it just not as popular but was around?
Well, it was just, expectations of leaders back then were I remember in the 80s, I helped a large corporation, basically go from monopoly to 5 for-profit companies in the United States. And, I spent a year organizing, interviewing, creating programs for the transformation and everything else. And then with the top 3 people at AT&T, and we're having dinner, and they said, "So, well, how would you sum this up?" And I'd say, "Well, I'd sum it up as you 3 are the father, and you're an authoritative, figure who's got everybody else so scared they're afraid to think for themselves. And so you're going to go into a for-profit organization, and means you've got to run everything and figure it all out. You're not going to be able to do it because all your managers, all your lesser leaders, all your workers are just keeping their head down and looking at, getting out, literally looking at, retirement, which might be 20 years away. There's all these stories that I was going through and interviewing and working with people. There was all these kind of urban legends of somebody who stepped outside of the box that thought it was something new and it didn't work. Literally 20, 30 years later, the story was still going on. So everybody learned. Everybody learned to keep their head down and not say anything. And that's just not, you can do that if you have a monopoly, but not if you're going to be in the multiple market, for, really trying to make money when you've got competition now and all of that type of thing. It is a time things have changed. We've become more diversified, as much as some political people would like to not acknowledge that. We have become more diversified. And, I look at who I'm working with. I mean, I got people in India, I got people in all over the United States and Canada and Europe, and they're from all sorts of backgrounds.
Yeah.
It's not the old white guy thing anymore. It's and I love it. I think it's great. But they all are running into the same challenges, but they're willing to look at them because the diversified organization that they're in needs them to be different.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel certainly the challenge of that. I think it's exciting that people can work more from home, that they can be, remote in terms of time zones and and all of that, and also really free in terms of how they work and how they solve a problem. It feels like an experiment in the sense of what is still working here or needs to work in terms of reporting structure and communication, and what is really outdated and we don't need anymore. And it really feels, I don't know, maybe this is just the journey of our organization. We've been around for about 12 years, and during that time we tried all sorts of things, disclosing everything to everyone. That didn't work. I mean, it sort of worked, but then, people also felt like, well, then I also want to have a say about all of this because you gave me all of this information. And then, closed our books again and said, okay, we won't share this. But then that also caused a lot of rumors because there was no information shared, and figuring out what works. And I'm sure it depends also what type of team you have, how senior the team is, and so on. But I certainly feel it's not only the organization itself, it's also the times we're in, where there's certain flavors of the day, I guess, that either become the new norm, or you try it and realize, that's not quite it.
Well, I mean, it doesn't matter when we're talking about. If you want to be a successful leader, the truth is, the more conscious and aware you are, the better job you're going to do. You see so many people teaching how to act like, how to act emotionally intelligent, how to say the right thing, how to do that, and it's like, become the right thing, become the confident, authentic leader that you're capable of being, so that you can handle and be present with whatever is going on. And quite literally, I watch people, we don't have time to think all day and research and figure out things. We've got to handle things as they're coming, and those things are coming. We're in a very rapidly changing, increased, complex business world today, and what the folks that I'm working with all learn the same thing. I mean, and they all come away with the same lesson, that they pick up. All I really need to do is breathe and be curious, breathe and be present. That way, whatever's coming in, I'm going to be in the best state of mind, have access to the best levels of thinking that I need to maximize my ability to have the insight as to how to deal with each and every issue that comes up. And for them, it's not a matter of, they're not drained from that because they're just being present. They're actually just literally, that's their job, is to bring out the best in everyone by bringing out the best in themselves. And so it just simplifies all of that, and as they grow, I was working with a fellow, he flew me down to San Francisco about a week ago now, and he is expanding, he's got 5 international businesses, a very successful, bright guy. But he's opening this whole new division, and he's running into the same things that he ran into years ago. And that is, okay, you're doing great. You've done a great job with your own growth, with the growth of your company. You've trained all the right people. They're doing all the right thing. But now it's time for you to learn to trust even more. Now it's time for you to really trust that everybody's going to do their job, and that the people you're mentoring, you're not doing it for them. You're just guiding them in their journey. And so you need to let go. And that's not easy for this guy.
Yeah.
But in letting go, he recognizes that he can trust. I just got an email from him yesterday, and he's just so grateful, and the truth is, I didn't do anything. All I did was help him remember that he's really created an amazing life, that he's doing an incredible job. It's just time for him to let go even more so. You've got to have this, you can't control 5 companies wearing a baseball cap. You need to be more of an umbrella and just handling things as they come up. You can't micromanage to any degree, because then you're just getting in the way. And so it comes down to how present can you be, how much can you trust, and create the organization that supports that trust.
So if I think about the core task, the core function that a conscious leader, especially in big organization, would still do, would they be things like making sure that the culture is, or giving sort of small impulses of saying, this is the culture we have, and we need to remind ourselves these are our values? Or would it be more like, look, I know, from my gut feeling, I know these are the areas of issues, let's focus on them? Or is it stepping back even further and just providing feedback when asked?
Way further.
Whoa. Okay, well, that tells me something about my level, right?
You're doing, you should have somebody else who does that better than you.
Yeah.
Whatever you're doing, it shouldn't be anything other than what you're best at, which is really, making sure that you're guiding the journey in as supportive and enriching a way as you can. Not only enriching in terms of profit, but enriching. You are the parent who's bringing all those people into, the being the best they can be. And as they become better and better and better, they give everything. I see it all the time. They give everything to that company. And of course, everybody's working from that place of really commitment and caring and giving their best. And that, I'm surprised, no surprise, you get everybody working together and they're going to be more productive and profitable. Initially, when somebody comes to me, it's my helping them get themselves together so that they're moving in one direction. They know what their highest intention is. They know what their greatest aspiration is, and they're clear about that. And it's like, okay, that's where I want to get to. This is who I need to be to get to there. And that clarity allows them to adapt the tools that they've learned to create that life that they're looking for. But then it goes out into supporting and bringing out the best in others. Sometimes that means sending me their C-suites and so that they can become CEOs or whatever they need in the organization. And you just begin to shift that mindset of the organization to one of that, we care about people. We want to bring out the best in others. And that includes who you're buying from, who you're selling to. It includes everybody. You have the privilege of determining, your little piece of the world and how conscious it is, how caring it is, how well people take care of each other, and that, when you get upset or you get angry or, how does that affect people? How does that affect your kids when you stand up and you're a big guy and you yell at them? I can tell you because I've done enough work with those kids when they're 35 and to know that they're still at the effect of that fear, that limited. So, yeah, it's just a matter of how conscious do you want to play. Your level of consciousness determines how you see, experience, and react to everything that comes into your life. So, well, what level do you want to play on? How conscious do you want to be? How much do you want to hold on to your egoistic sort of, control, which really puts you out of control, and really discover what being in real, authentic control is all about so that you can, with a tremendous amount of ease, not only raise the best kids you could possibly raise and empower them, but empower everybody in your sphere.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful and really promising too. I had a look on your website to understand sort of what you think the main building blocks there are to get from one to another, meaning from the zone, I think you call it, to the big mind and to the then conscious leadership. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it depends where you're starting on that question.
Okay, level again, yeah.
Yeah, people come to me and what they need to do is become more self-aware. They have to look at their past. They have to look at where they come from. They have to look at their habits, their beliefs. We talked about control. It's like, I would say 99% of the people who come to me have, everybody wants to be in control. I get that. But when they really look at their definition of control, they begin to go, oh my God, that's a definition of being completely out of control. They begin to ask, well, if I love and accept myself unconditionally, I'm afraid, other people might. I mean, 100%. That little child in there says people won't like me, or that people will reject me, or they'll think I'm egomaniac or whatever. So they've got this built-in belief system that says, if I love myself, I'll be rejected and I'm afraid I'll die. Or if I'm in my power, I'm afraid I'll be rejected and I'll die. And they in that moment, they recognize that this is a deep belief that they've had all of their life, and that everything they're doing in their life is running against that belief. It's like they've got their foot on the gas pedal and they're moving forward successfully into life. But what they recognize very quickly, and fortunately it's easy to handle, is that they also have their foot on the brake to try and be in control so that they don't get out of control. And that whole system, when you're using 50% of your energy out of fear, and your subconscious mind is creating this racket that doesn't allow you to really access your higher levels of thinking, to literally rewire your brain so that you can, be the best of who and what you are. You're struggling. You're always struggling. And it always, that's where burnout comes from. That's where not feeling enough comes from. That's where feeling like, geez, what's going on? I was successful and now I'm not, or whatever, however it plays out in your life. Your challenges that reflect all of those things. People don't understand that when an emotion comes up, it's really nothing but an indicator that a part of you is ready to heal. And rather than take advantage of that opportunity and insight, they shove it down, and they've got this inner cave that they protect at all costs to make sure nobody knows that it's even there. And that takes a tremendous amount of your personal power, your energy, to hide that. And that hiding that means you're not breathing fully. Not breathing means you can't open your heart. And if you can't open your heart, you can't open your mind. And if you can't open your mind, you can't be very conscious. And so you're going to really kind of always be, struggling in life, relatively speaking. You might look good, but
I love that you're talking about these indicators. I heard you saying on a different podcast, emotions, struggle, all of these things actually are opportunities to grow. And I think that, to me, that would require mindfulness to know, like, I was a little bit out of line or out of character, or just not how I want to respond, but I responded because I got triggered by something that was said or that happened to me. And it's wonderful to see it as like, well, that's a good thing, because now I know what to work on next, right?
Yeah. And I mean, whatever struggles come into your life, those are just indicators that a part of you is ready to evolve and heal. And so rather than negate that and hide it and control it, you learn to breathe into it. You have the tools to heal it in very short time, so that you can access the part you need to move forward in your life and play on the level that you're ready to play on.
Yeah.
Everybody's so stuck in playing their, protective games of hiding in their little comfort zones that literally end up killing them. And rather than, embracing change as the only reality that really we have, and evolving into who and what we're capable of. I mean, in my belief system, I think it's time all of us evolve, because if we don't, it's not just, we're not going to be here. The earth is going to just give us a good shake, and there we go. We were a good experiment that's not any longer around. But if we can become more conscious and take care of ourselves, take care of others, take care of the planet, then we can evolve with it. I mean, we're not put here to just, to be fixed on fear. We're really put here to explore what we're capable of. And that's the fun part. That's the great adventure.
Yeah.
When you open up that cave and you discover that love and acceptance that you've wanted since you were a little kid. When you open up your heart and discover how to love yourself and others, when you open up your mind and go, oh my God, I have that capacity to think and to create and to be, and that level of awareness to go through life and to enter death. It just it's all this huge opportunity, but it's time for us to evolve. And why in the world people are afraid to do that is really beyond me.
Yeah.
Their altar of fear is just nothing but a limitation.
I remember a quote from Buckminster Fuller. I think he said that in the 70s when he was talking about the technology and how it will evolve. And he said the only way to master this and not to be overrun by technology and ending up in chaos, as you said, sort of being wiped off the earth, is that our consciousness has to evolve faster than that of technology, which is interesting that, we're looking at singularity where, I guess technology is as intelligent as humanity, and I don't know, it's 35, something like not that far away. And topics like conscious leadership, I think, is wonderful that becomes more and more a topic as well, because maybe people just feel that there is more and that there is a different way. And I guess they also just, yeah.
Bucky happened to be one of my mentors, so
Oh, wow.
I spent a lot of time with him, and so I'm not surprised he said that. And I might have even learned it from him.
Yeah, they're great books. I believe some of the words that are in there he made up because he just couldn't find a precise word for things. It's fascinating. It's certainly a great
The
read.
fellow. I mean, I was into meditation. I was very good at quieting my mind, and he wanted to learn more about that. So he was up at. We had him come up to a ski resort in the summer, where they had a series of workshops about business and making the whole brain ready for business, that kind of thing. And I was, I met him. He was like 50 years older than I was or whatever. But we in the woods, we'd sit in front of the fire at night and have hot chocolate. And one day on the stage, he kind of was talking. A few hundred folks in front of us, and he's talking, and I'm 27, he's 87, so he stops talking, and I'm kind of going, well, let's get going here, and but he was just looking up, and then he came back, and the brilliance continued, and that evening I asked him, well, what was that about?
Yeah.
He said, well, when you quiet your mind in meditation, well, in that moment you can also access higher levels of thinking. And that was when I really, boy, I'll tell you, my world opened up at that moment. Rather than just sitting there in the silence and feeling like, oh, I'm so spiritual, I could literally access these amazing levels of creativity and insight and wisdom that I still use that's my way of thinking now. I don't even use my brain in the way that most people do. It just comes through the silence. And I trust that so, completely, that I don't have to think and worry and have that little editor up here that most people have saying, well, should I say it, or how should I say it? Or did I say it okay? Or, all that stuff is gone. You're just present and curious and conscious and enjoying life. So, yeah, I mean, Bucky's the one that introduced me to Big Mind. He had different terms for it, but he's the one that opened that whole reality up for me. And the brilliance of that, when I see it being used with my clients and their businesses, I see them using it to create something or to solve something or to come up with new ideas. It's just like, wow, it's just the only way to go. And if you're not doing that, you're struggling. You're not going to be a high level business leader. You just can't, because you're playing with half the ability that others are playing.
I feel like for me that state, it reminds me on what I didn't read much of Rudolf Steiner, but a little bit. And he has one book where he actually explains where he got his knowledge from, which I think he calls channeling or something close to it, but it would be probably a similar thing. And when I think about my mind and how I can suspend it, I only know two ways. One is doing quite a breath session. So I would do a breath session of like an hour and an hour and a half of holotropic breathing or something like that. The other one, really practical, is when I'm in the plane. I don't know what it is about the plane, because nowadays we have internet and everything there, but there's certainly, my mind is certainly free, and it might be the environment to be in, that I'm really by myself. There's no one else normally that I know, and that type of thing. But I would love to talk to you a little bit more about how you actually get into the stage, or what that requires, because I believe being a business leader or someone part of a team, or just a person in the family, and you struggle with finding a solution for things, or getting clarity, there's probably a way to get into a state that offers solution, correct?
Right?
Setting you up.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you have to look at why you're not in that state. That's the natural state we should be in. So why aren't you in that state? And all the research shows that we're only aware of about 5 or 10% of our thoughts, and the other 90% is subconscious. Well, unfortunately, that emotional backlog that we were talking about earlier has full access to that subconscious mind. And its job, it feels, incorrectly, is to keep your mind as noisy as possible, so that you don't have to be present with yourself, because you don't feel comfortable with yourself. So as you heal that emotional backlog, and the big tool that one of the main tools that you're using is learning to breathe. And so as you learn to breathe, as you learn to be present and curious, you heal that emotional backlog, and then you continue those practices and develop integrated whole brain thinking. So the right and the left brains are working together in a unified whole. The forebrain is blossoming into the conscious CEO of your life, rather than the amygdala, which is the emotional center. And that alone, if you just develop integrated whole brain thinking through that work, which everybody does, then that's a huge win. But then if you can continue to trust and learn to quiet the mind, and that's through breathing and focusing. Think in terms of meditation. I did it for decades. I mean, I've been a meditation teacher for over 50 plus years. But it's not meditation necessarily for the spiritual sense of it, but so that you can control your mind. I mean, if you can't stop your thought, you don't have any control over your mind. So the real game is how many breaths does it take for you to quiet your mind and stop thought? And
2-digit minutes for sure.
How long does it take me to find the light switch so I can turn the damn thing on? And so, do you want to have real control? Then learn to heal, learn to breathe, learn to open up and be authentic, so that you can access all of who and what you are. I mean, that's where your true brilliance comes out. And in that brilliance, you're going to just find a level of trust in everything that is coming into your life. Even though it might seem hard or difficult, literally you learn to be grateful for everything that comes into your life, because you recognize that it's all perfectly designed to support you in growing, literally. And so when you see it from that perspective, it's like, oh, okay, I just need to be in the right, frame of mind. I need to be in the right consciousness, so that I can see the opportunity in everything that's coming into my mind. I can see the opportunity and respond to it in a supportive, appropriate way, rather than, cringe or hide or retaliate or all the, close down like most people do. Most people train themselves whenever something comes up in their life, excuse me, they stop breathing. Well, as soon as you stop breathing, you send a signal to your body, then you're in fight or flight, and you've just disconnected your higher level thinking. So you really put yourself in almost a helpless place. Wow. You want to train yourself so that when something comes up, you breathe into it, you breathe through it, so that you're coming from the most conscious, aware place that you can, so that you can handle whatever comes into your life. You've got kids. You've got a lot of shit coming your way.
Yeah, and I know that I'm defaulting normally to a logical brain to solve issues, and not always the hard space. I found with kids it's easier to get into the hard space, depending on how high stress levels and sleep patterns and things like that are. But I have used every now and then the term of a heart-based organization or heart-centered organization. What that exactly means, I wouldn't know. But listening to you, I can quieting the mind basically means that there is something coming in that is a different consciousness, a different intelligence, but also, I guess, coming from that hard space that it seems to be have much more access, has more access, and is more versatile to deal with whatever comes their way, right?
It's less fear oriented.
Uh-huh.
That's the problem. Is everybody, they bow to the altar of fear. They're afraid of change. They're afraid of themselves. They're afraid of their feelings. They're afraid of each other. I mean, it's at least in this country. I mean, everybody, if somebody's different, they're not good. Trust anybody who's different.
Yeah.
They go, well, that's interesting. So, that means you can't trust yourself. It's just, however you are is nothing but a reflection of your own inner relationship. That might be worth saying is your relationship with yourself is really going to be reflected in your relationship with others. So if you wonder how you're doing or who you are, just look at your relationship with others. How much do they trust you? How comfortable are they with you? How supported do they feel? It's really a direct image, a direct analogy to recognize that you can't have really great outer relationships unless you have that great inner relationship with yourself. You're just not willing to be vulnerable enough to show and open yourself to that.
Yeah. So when talking about a company's success, how much of the leader's technical knowledge is then really required to be successful? Or do I hear you saying basically you let actually the technicalities of things handled by your team and you create an environment to get them, I guess, in a space where they can solve issues?
Your goal is to make sure you don't have anything to do.
Okay. That sounds great.
It is. That is your job, is to make sure everybody is handling everything so that you can really come up with the new creative ideas and genius and direction for the company that they need. That's a leader. When I used to take people out in nature, I didn't have to, sometimes in the middle of the night, walking through the woods or in the mountains. I used to have centers in Switzerland. I remember I took a group of 50 people up into the Alps, and we walked for 3 hours right through the middle of the Alps. I'd never been there. But if you're present and trusting, that's not a problem. I mean, I got to the lake where the trucks or the cars were picking us up, and at the time, and it all happened because if you're conscious enough, you're connected enough to intuitively have a firm awareness of everything that you need. But if you're fearful, if I'm hiking through the Alps in the middle of the night and it starts raining and I go, oh my God, that energy goes through all 50 people, and then they get really nervous and upset. And all of a sudden we're 50 lost people in the middle of nowhere, rather than 50 people on this amazing adventure that they remember the rest of their life. And you as a leader, that's what you get to create. But you can only create that from your own inner journey, that authenticity that allows you to arrive at that place of trust and consciousness where you're able to let go of that ancient level of control that really was the definition of out of control.
How many of the sort of bigger companies, leaders, do you think are conscious? Of course, there's different level of consciousness, but who would you say are, like, percentage-wise, or however you want to define it, compared to just burning themselves out and actually pretty unhappy on the inside or in their private life or in general.
I mean, you look at Elon Musk, very successful, but he's a mess. I mean, I've read enough about his life, and he's acknowledged that, his childhood was terrible. So he's just rampaging through life completely out of control in many ways. Where you look at the guy who's running Microsoft, he's a very conscious, present guy, very concerned and supportive of everybody in his environment and others also in the world. So it's just variations of that, everybody's playing it out, and that's fine, but it's like, well, why in the world wouldn't you want to really know who you are? Why in the world wouldn't you want to play at a level that allows you to raise your kids in empowered ways, to have relationships with your partner that are just all about how much can we love, how much can we open up our heart? Why not? Do you want, say you've got 100, say you've got thousands of employees, do you want them going home at night bitching at their kids and complaining and having 5 drinks so they can get through it? Or do you want them going home and filled with just thrilled that they had a day and contributed to something that they care about, and that radiates throughout their family and their other relationships? That's a leader gets to choose that. A true leader.
That's so inspiring.
Yes, I really want you to get this, and you'll make more money. I mean, the guy, I was just thinking of the guy that I just visited. I mean, he had 5 9-figure businesses. And that's an archaic, that's so outdated because he's more than doubled the value of several of those organizations in 5 years. I mean, in 1 year, it did most of that, but now it's growing at an exponential rate that I couldn't even guess what that was. And it's going to have effect, the world, quite literally, in positive and supportive ways. So he went from a place, he came to me just broken, thinking that he had lost everything. The woman of his dreams was leaving, his kids were gone, the adult kids. I mean, he just was at the end of everything. And, within months, he had restructured his businesses. Within a year, he had several of his people come in, and so they were taking over. I remember talking to him a year after I started working with him. He had micromanaged all these 5 organizations for decades. And I called one of the CEOs who had been made CEO to take over one of the companies. And I said, well, how's he doing? You guys doing better now? And he goes, I don't know. I haven't talked to him for 2.5 months. What? And I call him and he's like, oh, yeah, I'm doing this other thing and I'm really fascinated. He's doing exactly what he loves. And now, a year later, he's turned that into this incredible opportunity that's changing the world, and we're all capable of that. We really are. I mean, you're a smart, capable leader. What level do you want to play on? That's the question. That is the only question that matters. What level of consciousness do you want to play on? What level of influence? What do you want that influence to be? Yes, you've come up with a couple of widgets and ideas and things. That's great. And I congratulate you on that, really. But what are you going to do with the rest of your life? I mean, retirement, why?
Yeah.
I'm doing what I love. It's a privilege to get to do what I do. It really is. To sit in the middle and watch these people's lives, watch their families, watch all throughout their, all their relationships turn into these amazing things. It's just an absolute privilege to be part of that. Why would I, I still play golf. I still have my boat. My wife and I have the most marvelous relationship I could ever dream of. But, don't, the research shows that people, once, especially guys, when they retire, they only live for a couple of years generally.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah. I do know a little.
Yeah. And I've seen it. My brother did it. He 10 years younger than me, he hit 60, whatever, and retired. And 2 years later, he was dead. And I'm talking a great guy, wonderful guy. But there he was, one of the statistics. And so, why not let your fear of death turn into a love of life and get to know yourself so that you're raising the most amazing kids and creating the most amazing companies and making, the money that you're capable of making and enjoying the life that you're capable of having with a tremendous amount of ease rather than struggle.
That's a beautiful, beautiful quote. I will definitely repost that. That's fantastic. And I think people just some people just don't know what's possible. I found, wherever me personally, where I'm on my journey, I certainly realized that this knowledge is not taught at home maybe sometimes, at school probably not, and knowing that there's actually a choice of how you live your life, and sometimes it's just really the attitude towards what you do. You can continue doing what you do, but remind yourself, actually, well, I chose this because I enjoy that, rather than seeing the negative aspects maybe of hard work, when really you could also go to the point of like, I actually enjoy this hard work. I just somehow got into the groove of saying I don't, or whatever it is. Like, I think the attitude towards life and what you do is almost more important than what you do.
Agree with that. Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, some of the people, guys that I play golf with, go, "Why aren't you retired?" And I go, never mind. They're not going to get it. They don't, But I listen to them complain about their lives, and it's like, geez, I don't have any of those problems. Sorry.
Do you have hope that sort of as diversity is more encouraged and overall comes through in I guess our cultures now, that we will reach a place where I guess overall well-being is understood to the degree that they understand that we all understand that being conscious, breathing into things, quieting the mind is just a way to actually be happy in life or joyous.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can't be happy with a noisy mind because that's all fear-based. I mean, it's just draining. It takes you're giving up your power to, I mean, it starts when you're an infant. Think in terms of, I've asked all over the world, what does a child want more than anything else? Everybody love. Well, they want conditional or unconditional? Unconditional. Well, what will they do to get it? Anything they have to. And what they do to get it is they hide parts of themselves. They shove down parts of themselves, and the parts that are accepted, the parts that are loved, they embellish those parts, and that's great. That gets them through their childhood. That gets them through grade school and junior high and all the terrible things that can happen through that. But then you become an adult, and half of you has been left behind. You don't even know what feelings are about. You're so disconnected within yourself. You don't really have ever a complete, real confidence. You might have a black belt in something and feel like, okay, but that's not confidence. That's just fortification to protect your fear. So you really have to find out who you truly are to have true confidence. And it's that self-discovery that brings you to a place of accepting and loving yourself, and that gets really spread throughout your life. That's a life living.
I love that. I love you talking about this. I live in a part of Australia and part of the world where I think people are a little bit more self-expressioning and overall, I guess, trying to find ways to have a happy life. What comes with it is this undercurrent that, well, business is normally ugly or is bad, and you really talking it in the same sentence as like there's no separation between the two. Like, you can have a conscious life, you can be kind to people, and you can still make money and be successful and all the rest of it. I think that's
hitting the nail on the head. Everybody thinks that their family life and their work life and their spiritual life and their health life are different. And it's like, no, that's your life. How you're leading one part is affecting all the other parts, and it can't be any other way.
Mm.
So what do you want your life to look like? How conscious do you want to play? How whole do you want to be? Do you want your life to be, based on fear, or do you want it to be based on who and what you truly are? It's just a game. How do you want to? It literally is just a game, and it's like what? There's no reason to play on any level other than the best you can, and to be growing and evolving throughout your life. And there's no end to that. I'm 78 years old, and I'm just
Wow,
getting, yeah. I mean,
that's encouraging.
I was just offered a position as co-director of a national transformational coaching organization. I'm going to do it because I'll be training coaches, and I'll be having, they'll be using my materials, and the impact will just, quadruple the impact that I could have had otherwise.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That is really encouraging. 78. You are that type of person where you said, yes, people are getting older, but you also do the right thing to actually get there compared to maybe your brother. I don't know his story, of course, but that's so encouraging.
Well, you have to learn to breathe, because if you're not breathing, then you're not getting oxygen in your body, which means you're not feeding your cells, which 30% of that goes into your brain, which means you're not accessing your full potential that way. And your body just wears down. So, and you can't breathe unless you've healed your inner issues. That only takes a couple of months. And once you've healed your inner issues and you learn to breathe, then you learn to open things rather than close things. You learn to be excited about life rather than afraid of it. You learn to love rather than fear.
Is there a limitation when you have not quite the right intellect? I'm thinking, so you mentioned Elon Musk, so obviously high intellect doesn't necessarily mean you get to a conscious
Nothing.
lifestyle and life and all the rest of it. But is there a limitation of like, do I need to be fairly intellectual to really grasp your concepts, or to be, I guess, rigid or um, stringent is not the word either, like just create the habits that it requires to quiet your mind, to think broader, to access the big mind?
No. I mean,
Great.
you know, I mean, if you're not very bright, you don't reach very high. I mean, I know people who are mentally challenged, quite literally, who are love life, but they don't go, oh, I want to be CEO of, of this and that. They're happy just doing whatever they do. They're thrilled with whatever they have. So yeah, it might affect what you're doing, but it certainly doesn't have to affect your happiness.
Yeah. Oh, Ron, this was so insightful. I would love to quickly touch just on your books to sort of understand maybe which one to read first and which one after that. So you have the zone, you have the in and outs of mindfulness, and you have the leadership on the leading edge. Would you say there's a particular way of reading them, or does it depend a little bit on your situation, which you would recommend first?
They're really written in a series for that reason. Overscheduled by Success is the first one that kind of explains the overview of it.
Yeah.
That was for people because I saw so many leaders, very, very successful leaders, who were kind of playing on their success. They all, when I talked to them, they all had these, projects that they wished they could do, but they didn't have time because it's kind of like a rock band that doesn't create no new music because they're so busy playing their old music from 10 or 20 or 30 years ago. And so yeah, you can understand why you're just spinning your wheels rather than creating new things. I remember I saw that movie about Bob Dylan, and he was talking about when he was young, his big phase, and the music would just come through him. And he said, now that doesn't happen anymore. Well, it
Right.
doesn't happen anymore because of him, not because it can't continue.
Wow. What an insight.
And so, you really, it's just, yeah, it's up to you. There's no excuses. There's no limitations. There's only potential and possibilities. And, are you willing to imagine the life that you'd really love to live? Are you willing to create that inspired life that you're so worthy of? That's the question you want to ask yourself. And whatever's keeping you from that is what's ready to be healed. And that's your opportunity to grow.
Beautiful. Ron, thank you so much. That was a real privilege and an honor to talk to you, and very, very insightful personally, and I hope for the audience as well. So thanks for making time. When people want to look out, reach out to you, I believe your website is the best way, ronstotts.com, which is spelled RONSTOTTS.com.
Yep, you got it. Yeah.
Beautiful. Encourage everyone to have a look on the website. There are lots of resources as well that I found really, really fascinating. So Ron, thank you so much for your time, and really, really appreciate you being here.
All right. You be well. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. I hope today's conversation inspired you. If you found value in it, please share this episode with someone who could benefit from its insights. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to follow us to stay in the loop and have the best life ever.